I'm Ben Silverio.
And I'm Ansel Burch.
And it's
time to party. We are not doctors. We don't give medical advice. Please drink responsibly. Today's episode was recorded on April 16th, 2024. Wham, 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 wham. Ben, we have so much to talk about.
So much to
talk about.
Oh, I know that y'all party people are looking forward to our interview with the greatest hits filmmaker, Ned Benson. But first, before we get to that,
we gotta learn you something.
Because that's what we do here. You know, we have a little fun, but learning is fun because knowledge is power.
Yeah.
If you're just joining us this month, we've been talking about the movie The Greatest Hits, which is a new movie on Hulu and Disney Plus from Searchlight Pictures. A whole lot of fun. If you don't know what we're talking about, here's what our good friends at Rotten Tomatoes say. Harriet finds art imitating life when she discovers certain songs can transport her back in time, literally. While she relives the past through romantic memories of her former boyfriend, her time traveling collides with a burgeoning new love interest in the present. As she takes her journey through the hypnotic connection between music and memory, she wonders, even if she could change the past, should she? That's much better than IMDb.
Yeah, much better. Well done.
Better.
Well done.
Kudos to you, Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. And I guess the question is, what were some of the topics that you were thinking about doing for our edutainment this month? Because we usually like to focus on like one thing, but today we're kind of doing a pick and mix of like stuff that came up in our interview and stuff that we kind of researched lightly beforehand.
Well, you know,
so what were you thinking about doing?
I feel like the biggest piece of technology here, you know, it is all music related. So it's like I was thinking of like speakers, headphones, you know, like all those things, you know, earplugs even for a second. But
hi-fis.
Like, it really, I mean, do you mind if I go first? It's
please.
It really came back to the question of how do vinyl records work? And it's like, as someone who listens to vinyl, who has some vinyl,
hell yeah,
you know, I know how to make it work, but like, how does it work? So that's what I looked up. You know, this is probably the most simple edutainment that I've ever done. Because it's just like, you know, I have one very specific question and I need it to be answered. And, you know, I'm not necessarily an audiophile, so I apologize if this is redundant information for people. But, you know, I thought it was interesting. So looking through different...
I just think it's neat.
It's neat. While I was looking through answers to that question, I think I found the best one from Victrola.com and their blog, because they put it really quite simply. Like, it starts with Thomas Edison's phonograph, which in the late 19th century recorded and stored sound by etching the electrical signal of sound waves onto a tinfoil cylinder using a needle, which would record the sound wave signal by cutting a groove. So then to play it, the process is reversed, tracing the needle over the groove to produce the sound through the amplifier. But it was Emil Berliner. Berliner?
I don't know.
He was the one who made some modifications to this like complicated process. You know, he swapped out the tinfoil cylinder, which was very impractical because it would degrade rather quickly. He switched it out for a flat disc where the grooves would be cut by the needle, and then another needle would be used to play the sound back on this gramophone. So the playback process was really what I was like wondering about. I'm like, okay, so I know how a record looks, and I see the grooves, and I know you have to place the needle on the thing. But again, this article really put it.
How does the bumping
Yeah.
of the needle become music? Yeah.
Simply put, the record player's arm has a stylus on the end that reads the grooves of a record and generates an electric signal that will be carried by the amplifier. And I'm like, whoa. Like the vibrations and the grooves created by the needle is what does it. And it's just like, that's so wild. How? And I mean, this is the how, but it's like, you know, in Thor, when they say magic is just science that we don't understand yet, I feel like this is the.
Yes, that's from Thor. Thor is what that's from.
He quoted it.
No, I'm kidding. They did.
Hello, I have a giant Thor poster in front of my face right now. So obviously I'm going to quote it from the thing.
You're allowed. You're allowed.
But I mean, Ansel, I'm sure you have some insight into this complicated scientific process.
I wish I did. My understanding is kind of where you are, you know, like it's like a physical manifestation of a waveform, right? It's, you know, the up and down bumping controls the like amplitudes of the noise that are coming out, but with such complex sound, it's mind-boggling is what it is. The amount of data that is stored in that fashion. And I mean, when you come right down to it, it's apparently the exact same concept that we're using for like video on a like a CD, and, you know, data being sent across wirelessly. It's all still just like teeny tiny fluctuations in one electromagnetic signal. And I still am baffled by the whole thing. Like, I know that that's how it's happening, but that still doesn't tell me how it's happening. You just told me the mechanism. What's actually how? Why? What is it about the electrons bumping up against each other on that needle?
Like again, the article puts it pretty simply. The needle of a record player acts as one part of a transducer, which is what converts mechanical energy, which is the vibrations, into electrical signals we can hear. Logically, that makes sense. But when it feels like magic.
It's a mystery box, right? You're like, yeah. And then at the other end, this thing comes out. If you want to really bake your noodle, when I worked at the Museum of Science and Industry, one of the things that I worked on was the submarine. And the submarines have passive sonar, so not active sonar, where you know, ping, and it goes out and bounces off of stuff and comes back. Theirs was these little discs of metal, and in between two thin layers of some conductive metal is this special salt that's found in France. It's called Rochelle salt. And Rochelle salt, when you squeeze it, produces electricity. The electrons just like get real staticky up in there. And that's enough to create a microphone style effect that you can like hear the ocean just from like the electrons in this salt bumping up against each other.
See, when I hear things like this, I wonder how I passed sound class.
I can't imagine how they would have that would ever come up. You learned how to tweedle the knobs. That's the important part.
But it's just like there's so much to audio, and so I have such respect for producers that, you know, and the people who record it, all this audio, the people who run sound booths and all that shit. You know, especially in the field when, you know, you have different sounds going on everywhere that you can't control. It's couldn't be me, but like, thanks y'all for doing it.
Yeah.
I like the pretty sounds you make.
And I think the beauty is that every single producer I know, even the really, really good ones, and I consider myself like a kind of mediocre amateur in many ways. Even the really, really good ones are like, yeah, but this guy, there's always a bigger fish, and something about audio really like avoids the Dunning-Kruger effect of it all. But we have so much to get to, so let's keep moving. Thank you for that shallow dive into records. That's dope. And so important to how this film works. I wanted to talk again very, very briefly, very shallow dive, but something that I was thinking of is the concept of antiques.
Oh, I love an antique.
Right? We love an antique. This movie's about like things that carry the past with it. And it got me thinking about, okay, well, how old are antiques? Like the concept of antiques. And so I did a little Google. I did a little light jump into the pool of information that we've created. And it turns out we've had antiques since we've had stuff, just about. Like, apparently there is evidence of antique collecting going all the way back to Egypt and ancient Greece. Like these cultures that we think of as like where antiques come from, were already antiquing. They were like, yeah, this thing from Sumeria, gotta get that in my living room or whatever. Yeah, apparently there is evidence of people antiquing all the way back to the earliest major civilizations. So I'm guessing it goes back to 50 years after the foundation of Ur, when they were like, yeah, well, but that's really old.
I wonder who has like the oldest collectible known to man at this point.
I mean, it's got to be the Codex Hammurabi, right?
I guess so. Yeah, because I mean, anything older would have been lost, right? Or at least we haven't found it yet.
Unless you think of like the like cave paintings in France, or
you can't really collect those. They're kind of in a place.
Yeah,
but famous paintings are in a place, and you can collect those if you're stealthy enough.
Mm-hmm.
If that's you're a world-renowned
that's a movable place, though. Like you could take the Mona Lisa to a different museum. They're not going to let you, but you could do it.
If you were a super spy like Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow.
I really thought you were going to say Carmen Sandiego, because I feel like she could steal those cave paintings.
Mean, Carmen Sandiego can do a lot. I was just tying back into Ned and his work.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. It's a good transition.
Of Ned, we got him in on the edutainment fun a little bit this week. During our interview with him, we asked a little bit about the technical aspects of the film, and what types of technology were used and things like that. And he really jumped right in with a whole lot of cool stuff that they did. And I mean, if you've been paying attention and if you've seen the movie, you can probably guess that there was a lot of practical effects in this movie, and they did a lot of things practically. Very old school, very vintage. And here we are throwing it back to past us's. Hear about it from Ned himself. The third element of our podcast is edutainment, where we like to take a shallow dive to learn something new about like technology that we were inspired by or that appeared in the film. So, was there anything that you really like fun facts that you found while writing the movie or while shooting the movie that you think would be fun to share?
Or something you really like nerded out about?
The production designer really got into like slit scan and, looking at that in terms of like, we were looking at album covers like Hot Rocks and, movies like All That Jazz, that had frames where, like there were these like slit scan effects that were happening. But gosh, we did so much practically. It's almost like we were like anti-technological. Like we rigged a chair with wheels, and then we made a room out of we created that room with duvetine and then put like light tubes all up, and that was like time travel for us. And then we were flaring the lens with a flashlight. So Chung Hoon, the DP, basically his arm was exhausted all the time because we'd be either doing the time travel sequence where she kind of like moves on the chair and then goes backwards into that space, and he's next to the lens just like shaking his arm like trying to flare it. And then when we were doing that whole dance sequence at Bears in Space, same thing. He's next to the lens, you know, as the Steadicam operator, the Ronin operator was just like moving, and then he'd just be like next to the lens, like flaring it, you know, because we wanted to sort of use these elements, these flare elements, as this callback to the time travel and this sort of emotional, psychological experience with the flare. So a lot of it was kind of like DIY. You know, we're going to rig a chair this way and we're going to use a flashlight here and we're going to, you know, just throw up some duvetine and some light tubes. And that's, you know, that's how we create time travel, not, you know, nothing too high tech. Despite we got to use, I think we were one of the first films to use the Alexa 35 camera. We used some awesome anamorphic lenses from Apollo and Atlas.
Thanks, us from the past. So just to wrap up today's episode, I wanted to talk briefly about some of the stuff that Ned told us about, just because he gave us some really great, like, a hit list of things to Google, and I have saved you the trouble of Googling them, friends. One of the things he talked about was duvetine. Duvetine, not a thing I was aware of, but it's just it's like a velveteen black cloth. So it's not anything particularly like fancy or wild, but it is a very specific kind of cloth that has been an industry essential for blocking out light. It is like the thing you use for blocking out light as a fabric application.
Another thing that he talked about is slit scan photography, which is the process where a movable slide into which a slit has been cut is insert between the camera and the subject you want to capture. So originally used in static photography to achieve this kind of like blurriness, while using slit scan, it creates this like animation of like a psychedelic flow of colors.
I think of it as the quintessential Fear and Loathing effect.
It can also be seen in Vertigo, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and you know, for all of us who are into time travel, Bernard Lodge used slit scan photography to create the Doctor Who title sequences for John Pertwee and Tom Baker, used between 1973 and 1980.
That's tying it back. All right. He also talked about the Alexa 35 camera system, which is a 4K camera that is very fancy. I don't know what to tell you about it other than it looks really unassuming. It's like a little cube with a lens on the front of it. But it is like the coolest camera out there. It shoots in a Super 35 format. It's got a 4.6K sensor. There's a reason he was excited about this camera. It's got all the things.
Yeah, and The Greatest Hits was one of the first movies to use it. So that's super exciting.
Mm-hmm. Super dope.
And finally, he touched on lens flare, which is something that's kind of turned into a maligned technique thanks to J.J. Abrams, right? Now it's kind of a joke. But, you know, if used effectively, lens flare can be good. You know, for example, in Easy Rider from 1969, Harrison Arnold was forced to modify a camera car for his RE Flex, which resulted in numerous lens flares as he shot motorcycle footage across the southwestern United States.
And that kind of popularized
that was
it, right?
The thing that really
the footage from Easy Rider.
If we're gonna blame anybody, it's Harrison Arnold's fault for J.J. Abrams. No, we can only
there it is.
We can only
Shots
blame
fired.
J.J. Abrams for J.J. Abrams' downfalls.
That's true. That's true. Well, friends, this has been phenomenal. Thank you for joining us this month for an incredible series. And next week, we're doing an interview with Ned. You get the full, unexpurgated, except for all the version of this interview.
Monty. While you're anxiously waiting for us to tell you what's the word hummingbird in next week's episode, you can find us on the internet. I'm at Ben Silverio 20 on Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, etc.
I am at Indecisionist on Twitter and at The Indecisionist literally everywhere else. If you don't find me at The Indecisionist, I'm not there.
You can join the conversation by using the hashtag #time2party. That's time the number 2 party.
Or time the number 2 party, thanks to Warwick. All one word.
This is a good month, and we're ending on a good note.
This note's so high, it'll shatter all your glasses.
Yay,
so listen with headphones on.
Yeah, follow Harriet's example and wear some headphones. But maybe not while you're driving.
Yeah.
No,
not
don't
while
do
you're
that.
driving.
We didn't tell you to do that. You can't prove it. Yeah, so while you are hopefully rewatching The Greatest Hits on Hulu or Disney Plus, or even if you're enjoying it for the first time, afterwards, be sure to tune in next week so you can hear all about the movie, the characters, the inspiration, and all that good stuff from Ned Benson himself. Yeah. We like talking to people. It's a good time. So hopefully you had a good time, and you'll have a good time next week. So until then, be excellent to each other.
And party on, dudes. All right.